Everybody, it's Kelly Justice here with the Philosophy Society. It's August 28th. So this is the second video for today. We had a little discussion earlier. You can watch that. This is going to be the Peaceful Warrior, the second half of the lesson. And so it's on the website, and I posted the link in the chat group. So I'm going to share my screen, and then you guys can check it out on your phones in here because our media stuff kind of sucks a little bit. Okay. Sharing the screen. Okay, so here we are. I think we're on dialogue 8, right? You were with us last week.
Yeah.
We did 7 last week, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys have your stuff. You ready? This is the fun part. This is a little fun lesson here because you get to take turns reading the dialogue. So who wants to be Socrates? Yeah? All right. Sean, do you want to be Dan?
Sure.
Okay, so you guys read. So it's from dialogue 8, Realization of a Warrior. Telling Dan to start the old vehicle.
I don't know what to do now.
First realization of a warrior.
What is?
Not knowing.
What's happening to me? I don't cry.
Apparently you do.
It's embarrassing.
Emotions are natural like the passing weather.
What do you do if you can't do what you were born to?
Everything has a purpose, Dan, even this. And it's up to you to find it.
Go.
Go.
Okay. Dan starts the vehicle.
Your training can now move to a new arena, an arena where you find your answers from within. That old Plymouth, sit on it until you have something of value to tell me.
That's it?
I don't hear from you until you have an insight worth sharing.
That's all?
How are we doing tonight?
To the customer.
Okay. Angry, hatred, violence. They are really all just fear. Fear then, not money, is the root of all evil.
So here he's thinking of things to say to Socrates. You guys haven't seen the movie, so that's, yeah.
Chaos theory is correct, except chaos is not chaotic at all but perfectly controlled. If you lend someone $20 and you never see that person again, it was probably worth it. When making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you always first apply the peanut butter and not the jelly to the bottom half of the bread. The people who are hardest to love are usually the one who need it the most. There is never nothing going on. There are no ordinary moments.
Yeah, welcome back.
Okay, very good. So this is, again, halfway through the film after Dan, he's in the process of recovering from an accident. So you guys can watch the film, and then you can talk about it again next week a little bit more if you want. So I'll go through the philosophical discussion here. So there's at least 2 things. Dan is very upset about his accident and how his goals in life seem to be out of reach due to his physical injury. He begins to cry because he's so upset that things were most important to him. He believes he cannot do anymore. He tells Socrates, "I don't know what to do." Socrates responds, "The first realization of a warrior is not knowing." The wisdom here is about courage. A warrior is one who uses courage and is truly relevant when we are faced with the situation of the unknown. This goes back to, I guess I said this after. When we do not know, we psychologically can experience fear and anxiety. In those emotional states is where we evoke courage, the persistence to move forward and understand what is going on. Not allowing negative emotional states like fear and anxiety to stop us from pursuing our goals and dreams requires courage. The Peaceful Warrior is about fighting the weaknesses of the human condition in our pursuit to become our best self.
Little question.
Yeah.
Why we have fear and anxiety? Because it says, this negative emotional state will stop us from pursuing. I agree. But my question is, where does this negative emotional state come from?
Well, they come from our expectations. And so that's where Socrates, the character in the story, is different than the ancient Greek Socrates. Say that. That's where Socrates is trying to get Dan to not focus on the outcome. He says you can't control what will happen to you, but you can control what you do. So that's the difference between process orientation and outcome orientation. There's the consequences, which I don't really have full control over. They may end up the way I want them to be, but I can't know for sure, right? Science, a little bit, yes. But unexpected things may happen, and then we're like, whoa, what happened here? And process orientation is focusing on my effort in the moment of what I'm doing. And so It's about, there's a difference between intrinsic value and extrinsic value. Doing something for the sake of doing it, or doing something because of what I get out of it, right? And so he says, in the previous dialogue, you know, people are focused on, or maybe no, it's coming up later. Like people are focused on what they want to get, and it brings them a whole bunch of suffering. And then they do get what they want, and they still suffer, right?
Okay, so yeah, this all sounds good, but I want to dig a little bit deeper. So yeah, I mean it's right that we should focus on process, but I just asked, whether it's a fear or not. What about the fear is about, life and death? Well, what about like it's about like Nelson Mandela? When they do that, he could be put into prison for so many years. He has to face that consequences, right? So what if consequences like that? It's not like I mean the movie, even the movie. What if that Dan, maybe what he worried about is not, maybe he worried about he will get injured, seriously injured, maybe the spine, maybe he will paralyze, for the rest of his life, for something that serious, the fear comes from that. You could be tortured, you could be in the prison, you could be poor, you could become homeless,
They're rational fears, like they make sense relative to the circumstance.
Right. So how about that? How do people still focus on the process, but because the fear is coming so deeply from the I may get killed,
Well, what he, again, we can talk about that. What Socrates would say is if you're thinking about a future situation that is not in the present, so throw it out, right? From a David Burns perspective, which is a different course that I teach, I did it like a year and a half ago. We're going to do it again soon. He talks about cognitive distortions, and one of them is fortune telling. So I'm anticipating a future event, and I'm having anxiety about that event as if it were real, but it's not for sure that it's occurred yet. So my anxiety or fear can be disproportional to the reality of what's going on. If it is realistic, like Alexei Navalny, he got killed, right?
Who? Oh, yeah.
In Russia,
Yeah,
right?
in
So
Russia, yeah.
his wife would have a justified fear of ever being captured by Putin's Russia, right?
Or be poisoned.
Yeah, it's not good for her to she needs to be protected by basically the United States or whatever, right? And so but if at a certain point your emotions can become debilitating or demotivating, right? And that would be not healthy. It's important to take our emotion and find some utility for it. If it becomes paralyzing, then the emotion's not really doing what it needs to do, right? She needs to take precautions and not get poisoned or captured by Putin's Russia, the Kremlin, right? So she doesn't get killed, or her daughter. But she still needs to live a healthy life, right? And I think that because we can go down this road of paranoia too, right? Some people are they're clinically paranoid, right? They have irrational fears and anxiety about things that, really aren't going to make sense. Now, courage, as I communicate in this, what I wrote here, courage is the response to a fear or anxiety provoking situation. And there is a psychological attribute, right? Or a circumstance that includes situation and your psychological attribute state. And that would be courage, a situation where you're faced with danger. And even though you feel uncomfortable and anxious, you still use your willpower. You make a decision to do what is you've calculated as the right thing, right? So there was a dog fight when I brought my dog to the lake. These two dogs were, and they were getting hurt. And even though I felt, I sensed danger, I still went in. I got bit. I still went in and protected the dog because the owners weren't doing anything, and I was uncomfortable. I didn't like hearing this dog get hurt. And I wanted to set an example that you at least have to get in there and do something. You can't let the dog hurt each other. And so that would be courage. There's a situation, and even because the courage, where's the courage? The courage, because I wasn't feeling courageous. I was feeling anxious actually, because I was like, I don't want to get fucking bit. But my decision to not allow that emotion to determine my action, that's the courage part.
That's why, as a Stoics, I know you are Stoics, but they think, don't mind about the future and accept the reality.
Mhm.
All around you is happening, you can't control. But if you can accept and react, the best for you.
Good.
And people also, as you said, are creating issues in the future. But it's not happening. Why? You live in the present.
Well, that's what he's talking about too in the movie, right?
The the Russian
Navalny.
Navalny, he actually chose to go back to Russia.
So he sacrificed himself,
Right.
in some
You know,
ways.
so
right?
where does the courage come from? Because there's not like it is 100% sure, you know, almost sure that he will go back to the prison. You know, he actually end up, you know, so
He felt
knowing
that he was more powerful as a martyr, and that's his own decision to make. We can argue that it was selfish because he left his wife and child behind,
Mhm.
but you know, I think that I don't think he should have gotten himself killed. I think he had a louder voice alive, you know, and he could have just.
Right. I'm just thinking what's his, you know, how he can make that decision, because that's not an easy decision.
Well, you have to talk to him, and he might not even know. Maybe it's maybe a feeling. Maybe he's so upset about seeing his country being destroyed by this tyrant that he's looking beyond his wife and his kids. He's like, I'm trying to look at the future of humanity. Maybe he's looking at the whole world. He's like, I don't want my country to blow up the fucking world either. You know, they're threatening nukes every fucking 2 weeks. It's stupid. Well, let's reel it back. We're steering it back. Okay, let's go back.
No, it's courage.
Yeah, I think we juiced it out right there out of the lemon, you know? Okay, so next paragraph. Philosophically, the Oracle of Delphi stated that the ancient Greek Socrates, was the original Socrates, was the wisest person in Athens because he was not arrogant. Socrates believed he knew nothing and took a position of ignorance to develop his understanding of concepts and beliefs. From this position of knowing nothing, Socrates demonstrated the Socratic method, to inquire and ask questions based on the content of one's dialogue or speech. That's really important right there, right? What does it mean to be Socratic? It is important not to impose assumptions in being Socratic and base our reasoning on the information given. Friedrich Nietzsche, a 20th century German philosopher, introduced the concept of nihilism, not having any beliefs, moral principles, or a sense of meaninglessness. In the process of deconstructing an unhealthy mind, the concept of nihilism can help us identify with the process of deconstructing itself by allowing our identity to rest on the process of consciousness. Buddhism has a similar perspective with the acceptance of no self. In the film, Dan is in a state of dismay because of an unexpected event. Here, he can use the concept of nihilism or no self for his identity so he can grow from this position. So I'm bringing together a bunch of philosophical stuff. So sometimes I bring that stuff together, right? Accepting we do not know creates the space to build legitimate knowledge. Knowledge is known as something that is true. We believe it and can justify it. I should just say knowledge is something, because I'm being circular here. Accepting that we do not know takes courage. Simplifying believing something does not mean we know what we believe. If our belief is false or we cannot justify it, we would not know what we were talking about. So it's a little epistemology there.
Sorry, can you say a little bit more about how this nihilism can be used to destruct the negative cell or whatever? How can we use nihilism?
So Dan is upset, right? He's a gymnast. He got into an accident, and now he can't be a gymnast anymore. So his identity is shattered, and that's the suffering that we observe in crime. And so when you have these moments of your identity not correlating with reality, right? You can you can rest peacefully on the bed of nihilism or nothingness, because it doesn't go any lower than that. The only lower it goes is self-destruction, and that's not good. So you remove yourself out of self-destruction, like suicidal thoughts or self-harm, to a position of nothingness, and you can just meditate that, just pure consciousness as much as possible, right? And then you can build your knowledge of what is from there. And we did that with our first principles discussion before, right? You guys can watch the videos on YouTube to catch up if you want. And so-
nothing. You know, like for example, like Navalny. You know, he was so frustrated by what happened in Russia.
Yeah.
You know, he's so anxious. You know, angry. Or you know, even maybe depression.
Sure.
At that stage, how can he go to the nihilism?
Well, it's hard, right? Because like the nihilism is it's almost like John Locke's tabula rasa. It's just to clean the slate, to let go of everything, feel that as a baseline. This is I'm using nihilism here. This is not Nietzsche. I'm taking Nietzsche's idea and I'm doing something with it. So let's just first be clear.
Yeah,
about
exactly.
that.
That's why, you know, I said,
Yeah.
oh, nihilism can be used this way. You know, that's why I do it.
That's what I'm doing with it. And philosophers would be like, no, that's not nihilism. They'll be angry, they'll be angry with me, but that's okay.
Maybe a little bit more Buddhism.
Let them be a little angry. It's fine.
Yeah.
Well, but nihilism is like a moral. A lot of it is a moral perspective too, right? That it's an anti-Christian movement at the time. But for now, it's that sense of meaninglessness, or that there is nothing, right? But that can be a good thing too. It doesn't have to be only a bad thing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's not this process is not in 1 second and you change your mind. For example, Nietzsche, he was the Zarathustra. He was isolated in a cave, thinking. After many years or whatever, he came to the city with a flash and said, God is dead. So it's one process. You need to train your mind.
True. So I'm just trying to give some philosophical tools to Dan in this position, and we can all empathize with Dan in this state, right? And then you can use those tools yourself. That's kind of my goal. So I'm going to continue on this point and what we can go. In terms of cognitive distortions, we may have a distorted belief, but it is not knowledge because the justification of the belief is not supported. Just like the hate speech discussion we had before, it's not justified, right? There's internal contradictions or there's some fallacy or something like that, right? So our philosophical perspective will help us sift through what is real, what is just. When we evaluate our automatic thoughts for distortions, this is going back to the feeling good discussion, we are looking at the integrity of the justification for the thought. When we feel an unhealthy emotion like depression or sadness, disproportional sadness, we can use our self-awareness to be mindful of the automatic thought, then draw out the distorted thinking within it. We are looking at why this belief is not true because it is not justified and hence cannot be knowledge. We want to translate our distorted thinking to empowering or realistic beliefs that we can justify are true. And then here's an essay I wrote about knowledge. So you can just click on that and read that if you want. Should we do it now? No. In the film, Socrates responds to Dan, who is feeling shameful that he is crying. He states that emotions are natural like the passing weather. To have a better sense of not becoming consumed by our emotions and accepting them, we practice mindfulness meditation. It's important not to expect yourself to be perfect and not be emotional or catastrophize when you are emotional. When we feel emotions, it's important to be compassionate to ourselves for feeling things, but at the same time, make sense of those emotions. So for example, someone could be like, I shouldn't be angry and be angry, or sorry, I shouldn't be depressed and be angry that they're depressed, right? That's just craziness. Like you already had a negative emotion. Now you're having another negative emotion about the negative emotion. That's insane, right? Don't do that. So when we experience things, it's almost like seeing yourself as like a little animal. Like it's okay, you know, like not feeling sorry for yourself, but just accepting that this is difficult, clearly, because you're feeling it. And then on the other side, like being self-compassion, we can observe what the cause of the emotion is, right? So I talk about the object of emotion. There is something in your experience that is making you feel this way, right? What is that thing? And when we clarify that, and when you can see it better, right, then sometimes you won't feel as bad because you're like, oh, wait a minute, like I wasn't even really looking at it correctly, right? And that's what the distorted part is. It's like when you go to like the amusement park and there's those different mirrors that distort the reflection. That's kind of like what distorted thinking is. Or the way we're perceiving something or the way we're thinking about it, conceptualizing it, is not representative of what it really is. And when that includes other people, through communicating, we can reduce a lot of conflict, right? And so that's, again, philosophical, just talking shit.
But we have also the reptilian amygdala.
Hmm.
And this is how do you control? Sometimes we are animals,
Yeah.
and we call reptilians, and it's our heritage.
Yeah.
This is the different people, different situations.
Well, you gotta build your environment. That's the best way. And certain things like eating healthy and sleeping correctly, that's important. Who you associate yourself with, that's a big deal. And so, okay, let's continue. Dan responds by asking what someone is supposed to do when they cannot do what they're born to do. Socrates explains how everything in life has a purpose, and it's up to us to figure out what it is. This is a fundamental factor in having meaning in life, that we establish a sense of coherence in our experience. We want everything to fit together and make sense. That also has to do with your identity. Who you are, right, needs to kind of fit together as a coherent whole. If there's parts of you that are contradictory to other parts, it can cause this weirdness of sense of self, right? So coming to a wholeness or a gestaltness of what you are as a person relative to the decisions you've made and stuff that's happened to you, that's the unity of your selfness, right? And the suffering is when something happened I didn't want to happen, right? Or I made a mistake, And so how do we mend that together, right? That's like a existential healing. Some things are not in our control, that are unexpected and seem to take us off track from our goals. It is important to determine firstly what is in our control and what is not, like the Serenity poem. I'll call it a poem. Once we have have a sense that we can focus our efforts on those things that are in our control. Once we have a sense of that, we can focus our efforts. We want to make sure that our effort is not wasted and be mindful of the Pareto principle, that 80-20 rule. The 80% of our results come from 20% of our effort. Determining what that 20% can increase one's effectiveness within what they're in control of. Know thyself, know your identity, and do not know anything that gets in the way of who you are. I gotta edit this. Build and grow from what you are and around what you are given based on the environmental conditions you have. So that goes back to the amygdala thing, right? Like there is a certain trajectory that you will have that you can't change. And so you have a buffer zone for that, right? Socrates then tells Dan to sit on the car until he has an insight worth sharing. Here, Socrates is instructing Dan to reflect. Plato wrote in his dialogue, The Apology, an unreflected life is not worth living. It is important for us to know what happened, what we are in control of, and what we could have done differently. We determine this by reflecting. Nietzsche's revaluation of values is another principle that's relevant in our reflections. There's a post here you can read. We want to reflect, I need to edit that because it's not good. We want to reflect on our values, understand the priority of them, and whether what we deem as important is actually contributing to our well-being or in line with our identity. Once we are aware of how our values affect our lives, we can change and modify them as necessary. The principle Socrates was interested in Dan reflecting on was the value of the present moment. He wanted Dan to discover this value on his own. In Dan's time on the car reflecting, he comes to two important realizations. First, Dan states, people who are the hardest to love are usually the ones who need it the most. When someone is harmful to us, being understanding, compassionate, and empathetic in response. Recapitulating the same negativity that others are expressing will only make matters worse. It's much better to respond constructively and be a role model for pro-social behavior. At the same time, do not tolerate others being abusive to you. Respond assertively with boundaries and take space from them if necessary. After many hours, Dan comes to the realization that Socrates wanted him to remember what he wanted him to remember. Dan says, there's never nothing going on. There are no ordinary moments. Socrates laughs in gratitude and welcomes Dan back to the present moment. It is from the present moment where we can deal with all issues that obstruct our purpose or goal. Therefore, it is in the present, via being mindful, can we become successful in that which is meaningful to us. Okay, there you go. That was a lot. So that's dialogue 8. Any other thoughts? Or should be the next dialogue?
Have you seen the movie?
No, not yet. You have a link?
Yeah, I have seen it.
Now you're like, I gotta watch a movie now.
Yeah.
Watch a movie and make a
I want to.
difference.
Okay, so you're Dan.
You got big hidden and gone. This isn't another vision, is it? Because I don't see how this couldn't how it could be happening. What the shell are you doing?
Something wrong?
We don't do anymore. Remember, we know better.
We are better than everyone that doesn't know what we know or live the way we do? Is that what you mean?
Not better, maybe smarter.
There is no better. You'll never be better. Same way you'll never be less than anybody else. The habit is the problem. All you need to do is be conscious about your choices and responsible for your actions.
Is that way out of all the people? You should have thought you chose me.
Are you done flattering yourself? You chose me.
Why should believe me? You tell me yourself to listen to my out.
How do you know I'm not your own intuition speaking to you right now?
Maybe I made you up. Don't mess with me like that.
So then this goes to the, now this is the next scene. So I guess I could have put like a little break there, but now they're in the alleyway and Dan's like puking because he's drunk.
Yeah.
So it's you, Jose.
Oh, realistic and responsible for its actions.
Oh, one sec. Everyone has its what?
Every action has its price and its pleasure. Recognizing both sides, the warrior becomes.
And then Jose?
Oh,
Realistic and responsible for his actions.
realistic. Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, so I'll just be the thug. Your boy sounds bad over there, man. And then you gotta be kidding me. Money, boys.
You picked the wrong kind of shit to pull. These boys, a little age, have the right time in the right place.
Socrates throws his wallet. Yours? Looking around for something, little tough guy? Thank you. Good night.
Did you forget our watches?
This is where you gonna do and right.
Oh, maybe I should stop that. Akili is a computer. I don't have one.
Give it. Thanks, old man. What are you? Medium jacket? Is he a what? I'm not taking your jacket.
It's a good jacket. A nice warm thing.
I'll take it. It's a good jacket.
You are about Dan's size. What size shirt do you wear?
Are you kidding Christ? So how far are we going to take this?
And then there's another break, and now they're like
Yeah.
in their underwear walking,
Right.
and then Dan gets upset. So, Jose?
Okay. They could have killed us. They could have killed us. You could have killed every single one those guys. Assessed instead. We're probably going to get picked up for indecent explosion. You think that's funny? Do you? Do you think that's funny? You could have laid off every single one of those guys. Tell me what the hell you were thinking.
That the ones that are hardest to love are the ones that need it the most. That knowledge is not the same as wisdom. Wisdom is doing.
They could have killed us.
It's a transformation.
Death.
Yeah, a bit more radical than puberty, but nothing to get particularly upset about.
What the hell are you talking about?
Death isn't sad. The sad thing is most people don't live at all.
Okay. So in this scene, Socrates rewards Dan by taking him to the bar for a drink and a cigar to celebrate his accomplishment of being in the present moment when he was at his lowest. It can be difficult for us to be in the present when it is painful or difficult for us to accept. However, in these moments, when we were at our weakest, that is the most important time for us to be aware and make a decision that will make things better. Incorrectly, Dan says that they can act this way because they are better than others. Socrates responds, no, not better. For the same reason, you cannot be less than others. We see this discussion of being better or less than others in Burns' readings of self-esteem and deriving it from achievement. Socrates identifies that the problem is habit. The solution is being conscious of your choices and responsible for your actions. This involves a sense of self-awareness and self-control. Dan responds that Socrates himself told him to listen to his own intuition. Socrates replies that maybe it is Dan's intuition speaking to him. Here, the film gives the audience the idea that maybe Socrates is a figment of Dan's imagination. Independent of the reality of Socrates' existence, the wisdom he has embarked on Dan is the same. Here, there is a large element of Aristotle's practical wisdom and learning how to act virtuously. As we are confronted with different situations, we learn how to apply the abstract concepts of different virtues like courage to solve the situation in the conduct of our actions. Dan is now vomiting due to too much alcohol. Socrates reminds him, every action has its price and pleasure. Recognizing both sides, the warrior becomes realistic and responsible for their actions. The principle is consequentialist, meaning that we determine how ethical an action is based on the consequences from the action. Socrates, on an attitude towards death, is a form of transformation. Humans have existential angst when it comes to thinking about death. End of life anxiety leads to belief in religion, God, and the afterlife in the form of terror management. Humans can in some ways control how they die by living a healthy life and avoid preventable disease or physical injury. Until we develop technology to prolong the physical body, cure illness, or upload consciousness to some kind of computer, it is best to focus on how we live rather than be anxious about what happens after. This goes back to the previous concept Socrates communicated. Death isn't bad. The sad thing is most people don't live at all. It is up to us to focus our attention as much as we can in the present moment through mindfulness.
So, I mean, we shouldn't, I mean, it sounds perfect, but if I could do it, like we shouldn't be worried about, I mean, we shouldn't be scared about, you bad, suffering, from all this diseases, injury, cancer, whatever, I have no money to see a doctor. I don't know. I mean, that's great if we can have that mental, state, but how can we do that?
Well, I think it's like when it comes to mindfulness and meditation, you do have to practice, like basically every day. And the research that I read was it's 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. And that's like the bare minimum. It's like
To
have
practice
like
mindfulness.
prolonged, like neurological, like I don't know, like a prolonged neurological foundation, like how your neurons are like wired together in your prefrontal cortex. So it's at least like 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening. And it's independent of your beliefs. Even if you don't think it does anything, it still has an impact on your stress levels and your emotional stability and stuff like that. So, and again, like it's I think that we talked before last week that there's a balance between reflection and planning. Reflection is the past, planning is the future, and then there's the present moment. So you do need to kind of do a little bit of all three of them. And it's learning how much proportion of each do I do, right?
Right, but are you a slave of your past, or do you feel totally free?
Well, it's not that you're a slave to it, but it's that your present is contingent on the past. Like I now,
Consequence, yes.
right, am a consequence of what has occurred in the past. So some things of the past may be affecting me now and will affect me in the future. So it kind of goes through everything.
How could you predict the future? Yeah.
Well, okay. Like I think there's limitations to our predictions, right? And it's how we conceptualize what that prediction would be. Whether we think it's deductive and it will always be the case, or if it's inductive and it's more likely to be the case.
Yeah, I think it's more of a probability.
Yeah. Like,
In some countries, they think now to condemn because of your personality, and they can predict, even the one can find or what they can predict, that they can blame of whatever before you did this action, this
Okay.
crime.
Okay.
Canada is thinking that.
okay, I'm not really sure about that. That's interesting.
No, it's just uses one prediction,
Okay.
but yes, artificial intelligence.
Oh, I think that's a futuristic movie which you're talking about. It's just a concept.
Like Minority Report.
Yeah, kind of. We
Yeah.
were talking on the same lines.
Yeah, it's like they had this thing called precognition where they would know if someone was going to murder somebody before they committed the crime, and then they sent these like time cops in to arrest the person just before they committed the murder. And then there was all these
It's
things.
just a concept.
Even the game, the game,
That's an interesting movie.
that's, can predict all what you are doing now because I know it.
Yeah, like it's part of it is based on your past experience, and you're kind of just like extrapolating what they've done in previous situations. But I think it's hard to like know everything, you
Right.
know?
It's something like if you do exercise, I can predict that you have more chances of having a better health. It's something like that, but something very precise. It's just a conceptual thing which we might never be there.
Because something else could happen that we
Yes.
didn't include in our initial analysis.
Right.
Like, for example, that person eats something that was toxic. It's independent of their exercise, and their later like mortality wasn't related to any exercise issue. It was this other thing. So you could say if I do exercise, you know, within
You
a
live longer, but you met with an accident which is nowhere related to exercise and your physical health.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, next dialogue. Who wants to read?
I
You
can-
guys? Yeah. Okay, then switch. So whoever did, the other person
Um,
does Socrates, the other person does Dan.
I was Dan last time, but I'll be sorry.
Yeah. I'm scared, but I feel like I got rid of all the old stuff and it was the right thing to do.
When you feel fear, use the sword. Take it up here and cut the mind to ribbons. Slash through all those regrets and fear and anything else that lives in the past or the future.
I want to be able to do that. I think I'm ready.
Ready for what?
Devoting my life to a higher purpose.
Really?
Service to others, right? That's going to be me now. I'll do whatever you think I should.
I think you should continue your training as a gymnast. A warrior does not give up what he loves. Dan, he finds the love is what he does.
Look at me. Look at me. I have a metal rod in my leg.
A warrior is not about perfection or victory or invulnerability. He's about absolute vulnerability that only true courage. That's the only true courage. Sorry.
What kind of training you think I can do, huh? I just had an accident.
The accident is your training. Life is choice. You can choose to be a victim or anything else you did like to be.
And just ignore what happened to me?
A warrior acts, only fool react.
What if I can't do it?
That's the future. Throw it out.
How would we start?
There is no starting or stopping, only doing. I want to show you something.
Shows Dan the ring set he made.
When did you do all this?
When you were lying in that hospital,
Well, I was what?
now we can really go to work.
All right, so philosophical discussion. So Dan and Socrates are sitting on his couch having some tea. Socrates tells Dan that when he feels fear, it's time to use the sword to cut the mind to ribbons. Anything that keeps one from the moment, the past or future, is irrelevant. To be immersed totally in the present is not realistic. At moments, it's important for us to reflect and plan for the future. However, most of our time can be spent observing and experiencing what is happening in the now. We can use Burns' distortion checklist to remove any unrealistic automatic thoughts, apply our critical thinking skills, and enhance our motivation. Dan is ready to commit himself to the same value that Socrates communicates at the beginning of the film, a higher purpose of service to others. Socrates responds by telling Dan to continue his training as a gymnast. Dan is shocked in disbelief, showing Socrates the large scar on his leg, saying that a piece of metal is holding it together. Socrates says, "Warrior does not give up what he loves. He finds love in what he does." The ultimate service to others is being our best self. Each person has their own unique identity and purpose that will contribute to humanity overall. In our interactions with others, we can be good to them as a form of indirect service as we pursue our own goals. From a phenomenological conscious perspective, being good to the self is number one. Through our self-awareness, we can see ourselves as an other, and service to all selves, including our own, is important. We take a fundamental priority over our autonomous self over external selves, which is saying that you have self-love and not just give yourself to other people. Socrates tells Dan that the warrior is not about perfection, victory, or invulnerability, but absolute vulnerability, which is the only true courage. It is important to be mindful of the should distortion and creating unrealistic standards. Being realistic about the nature of learning and training gives us an opportunity for growth, no matter what can happen to us. We have the decision to take what happens in our experience and make the best of it. This means we embrace our mistakes by being self-aware of them. Applying our Aristotelian virtue of courage and the development of our practical wisdom and applying it within specific situations is fundamental. Dan complains that he had an accident and as if it was a permanent obstruction to the pursuit of his goals. Socrates responds quickly by saying that the accident is his training. Life is choice, and you can choose to be a victim or anything else. The narrative we frame our experience matters. We can have an internal or external locus of control on how we interpret events in our lives. With an internal locus of control, we are able to take responsibility for what we can change and make a difference in directing our experience towards our goals. That which is out of our control is a training exercise. We can embrace what happens to us and overcome obstructions as an opportunity for growth. Dan is shockingly asked if he is supposed to ignore what happened to him. Socrates responds by identifying that a warrior acts, whereas a fool reacts. Action is intentional, whereas reaction is an unconscious response and not of one's own volition, free will, or agency. Dan anxiously wonders if he's able to be successful, and Socrates reminds him that the thought is future-oriented and irrelevant. This is also the distortion of jumping to conclusions and the fortune teller error.
Question.
Yep.
I just wonder, because in the movie, after they show the scars, they kind of go back to the training. The faculty already prepared, the ring, there. So I mean, I understand the idea, but I'm just wondering because this seems like it gives a I don't know, unrealistic hope that basically a human can control, how he feels, like I know I've asked this before, but I will go back to this because I actually don't know, so I go back to this again. So like one of the faculty is so huge. You saw the movie Shawshank Redemption, right?
Mm-hmm.
The guy in the
It's a great example of this.
Yeah. The guy in the prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, he managed to get out, but a lot of people didn't get out. What if you in that situation? How do you act, not react? How do you still say, oh, you don't have to be a victim. You can be your own master or something like that.
Well, I think it's how you tell yourself the story, right? When things occur as an event, that's independent of just like Stephen Covey says in the Proactive book. Being proactive is about how I respond to things, right? That's what he means. He talks about proactivity as a contrast to reactivity. So you can think about what perspective you want to take, and you can write the narrative of the circumstance that you're in. You can write a victim narrative, like things are happening to me and it depreciates my meaning or well-being, and I don't have any control. Or you can objectively evaluate and assess what control do I have, and then from within that, now I'm going to act and do things. And again, Stephen Covey shows those diagrams of the circles, right? And he says, you want to expand your circle of influence. And so Dan, and the main thing here that I could add to this is the self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't want to have a limiting self-fulfilling prophecy on what you're doing, because it's the false belief itself that you couldn't do it that led you to not trying, and then you didn't do it, right? But even if you had a hypothetical belief that may be false, but at least you tried, and then you failed, then you at least tested it out. But if you had the belief that I can't do it, then you're never going to try.
So
right?
you're basically, I mean, it sounds like basically, the human, can conquer any hostile environment if he really believed in himself. Even he was contained in a cage, or he was in a punishing camp, so human is absolutely, oh, that sounds like a god,
Well, there is some degree of godliness to being human. I would say that for sure, because you make decisions and you can do things, right? You're not like a superhero, like in the comics or in like the religious kind of sense, where you're just like this, you're just reality. That's not what you are. You're a being though. And compared to other forms of matter, you're totally a god because you can do stuff. Like this thing would just sit there forever and just decay and deteriorate into dust. It doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't have its own autonomy. But autonomy in itself, the self-directing capacity for decisions, it's one attribute of godliness. It's a different kind of God, though. Not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree that, but we also have our, the not God part, the powerful part.
Wow.
So we are a mixture of godliness and also the the weak, So basically, it sounds like I don't know. I mean, it sounds like if I were to put it in that prison, I don't know if I can handle it.
That's why we're talking about this stuff. So that if you are in that prison, you can think. You're like, I remember these ideas, and at least you're exposed to it. You don't have to make it up, And that's why we're going through this, and that's why there's some wisdom here, I would say.
You talk about exposure therapy last
Sure.
time, right?
Okay.
So if I if someone bully me,
Yeah.
someone gonna beat me, so people will figure something out when they face that kind of situation, like the exposure therapy is about.
Oh, no, I mean exposure in the sense that, like, from a problem-solving perspective, if you've at least seen the solution once, putting it into practice is a different thing. Because you have to be in a situation, feel those emotions, have your habit come through, and then there could be a moment of self-awareness where, like, hey, I don't actually have to do it the way I've been doing it. I know of this other way. I may have not used it yet, but I know that it might work. And now you have the choice. At least I'm trying to give you at least something so you can make a decision in the future when it's necessary, right? It may not be now, but that's the purpose of education and learning. Usually it's not for you right now. It's so that you have it with you later on when you do need it.
Because all the mass media or all the movie or whatever, the information I got, when they describe those extreme situations, like Stephen Berg, talk about what was the World War II movies, all those things, all the things you absorb, you feel like, oh, that's like a hell, and then you are so helpless if you were put in that. That's like the ultimate fear, at least to me, But on the other side, you want to be the god, you want to pursue some right thing, but probably you sometimes you face that kind of situation. So because what I'm saying, all this information that we got since I grew up is like that. So it's horrifying. That's the thing that totally you become a victim. So how can I develop the concept that I'm not a victim? I could be a master of myself.
Yeah, that's the whole point of this.
Yeah.
And that's, it goes back down to just fundamentally what you are, and you are a conscious being, right? And then your personality is kind of around that. And so you'll have beliefs and different things about you, and you can change a lot of that stuff, right? Like what you believe about yourself. But like the reality of a conscious being is something that can't really change. That's just what you are, unless you get hurt and you're in a vegetative state or something like that, or you get killed, right? And so that we would go back to the nihilism thing. When you're in that prison cell, you just got to start breathing and meditating, and let the change of environment sink in, and then you're going to find a new identity within that. That's the goal, really. Yeah, we're going to have to, right? Like, what are you going to say? Otherwise, you just be like, what? This like life? I'm just going to suffer. Well, you don't have to though. Like you might experience pain and discomfort, but suffering is a different thing.
You're right, but life is choice. What about the seven forces?
Okay.
What about your boss, your family, the society, your church, the people? So in this case, life is choice, even the predestination for some people. They believe in predestination. What kind of freedom is our freedom in life is choice?
Well, you have a choice to, like, going with the Stephen Covey proactivity idea, you have a choice to respond to all of these different things in your life in however way you want, right? But some things you're kind of don't have a choice for, like my height. I don't really have a choice for that, right? Or like my
Or how
ethnicity.
high you jump? Can you fly like a bird?
In North Korea, life is choice. How can I explain to one citizen life is choice?
Even when you live in North Korea.
No, this one example, for
Right.
example, how can I explain?
Yeah.
This is it's really sometimes very relative. You know,
Yeah.
it's not. It's,
If I
we
live in
think,
Nazi Germany, what's
we
my
think
choice?
life is choice.
Well, but people still resisted the Nazis, and eventually the Nazis lost, right? And in tyrannical states, those states have that embedded within them, that there are people that are aware of what's going on and they don't like it, right? And you could argue at the same time, in democratic states, there are people that are aware of the democracy and don't like it. They would prefer to just have a ruler who they think is best. But then when we observe that, we see the problems with dictatorships. Is how do you determine whether this person is the right ruler? Like, what's the method for that? Is it determined? You know, like, how is anyone able to even do that and be correct about it, right? And so the next best alternative is just, let's just all choose somebody together. Hopefully we get it right now and then. You know?
If there is a people resistant, I mean, within Germany, within not the American force, but majority of the people, like for example, living in Nazi Germany, they dare not stand up. The small factories, the guerrillas, a small percentage of the whole population.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, it goes down, like, there's your environment, right? But then your consciousness is inside of you. And that's where the decision comes from. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the distinction is to realize everyone has the agency to do what they think are right, even if they're facing difficult circumstances, because we're all conscious beings, and if we're awake and aware enough, we know what's right to do. And there are things that there's to a certain extent of things we're able to control, but that's also not to say we will get the outcome we are hoping for. And it's also to not be attached to a certain outcome, because, like, for example, if you have the will to escape the prison and do what's in your limit to try to accomplish that, it doesn't mean you will succeed per se, but there's the difference between not acting or not doing anything and, like, at least attempting. And there's also a difference between trying versus being attached to a certain goal, to a certain outcome of, oh, you will succeed.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a good example. You know, it's just using your example, you know. Yeah, but there's a price for trying to escape the prison. You know, sometimes people are hesitant. You know, that's difficult. You know, make a choice. If he doesn't try, maybe he can still have a relatively, peaceful. You know, but if he try, he fail, he got caught, then he will be worse. Maybe he'll be tortured.
Future. If
Hmm?
you're again going to future, you know, like, if this is not successful, till the time you try it, you won't come to know whether it will be successful or not. Right? At this point of time, suppose this is and you want to escape it. If you want to try it, as until the time you try it, you won't come to know whether you will be successful in escaping or not. Right?
But I have to.
You will have to work out a plan which you think will help you escape. This is what is present. You know, if you want to escape, you will chalk out a plan to move out. Whether that plan would be successful or not, that's the outcome. That's the future.
Yeah.
By the time you execute that plan, you won't come to know whether you will be successful or not. That's your fear. You're going in future. I will not escape because if I get caught. That's it.
Yeah, because remember Socrates says that you don't know if you're going to win the gold because it's not within your control. But what you can do is you can put the preparation in. So escaping the prison is the same thing, right? Being in the prison is bad, and therefore your only option really is to try to escape if you can escape. That's what this theory is proposing. Now, there might be some flaws in the theory and it might not be the best, but we're looking at it because I think there's something here that we can talk about. You know?
And again, if we said every action, it has a price.
Yeah.
We talked before.
Yeah.
So if you do whatever, you'll have, you know, it's you have one price. So you have also to think before and know what happened. If, for example, I kill someone, I go to the prison for sure because it's the price or something positive. What I do something for the society. I have a reward. So this is a thing. And the other thing is about you. What is the purpose of your life? This is very interesting. He said you have what unique. This is very. But what's my real purpose in my life?
Well, we can talk about that. That's important, and that's the second habit in Stephen Covey's book, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep the boat going here. So I'm going to finish off this one section. Dan asks how to start, and Socrates responds, "There is no starting or stopping, only doing. There is a state of being that Socrates is directing Dan towards. There is no starting or stopping what you are. There only is. Be what you are. Training is a consciously directed way of being. There is a lack of procrastination in this attitude and a helpful as a realistic cause." And
What does procrastination mean?
procrastination is like putting something off. So
It's like, I'll not do it today, let's do it tomorrow. That's procrastination.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
and so you don't want to put off being yourself. That doesn't make sense, right? You just be who you are. Okay, so next dialogue 11 is on suffering. So this is after Dan trains and then he goes to see his old coach and he's like, now I'm better. I'm better than I was before. And then there's a problem there. So he wants to read this thing.
Let's change the combination. That will be nice.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Okay. So you want to start?
Okay,
Socrates?
so,
Okay, do you want to be Dan?
nearly all of humanity shares your predicament, Dan. If you don't get what you want, you suffer. And even when you get exactly what you want, you still suffer because you can't hold on to it forever.
You thought I couldn't do it.
It doesn't matter.
He doesn't know that I will be there 100%.
You don't need him or any letter to get up on those rings and do what you love.
Yes, I do. All right. I'm talking about getting there and winning the gold right now. So yes, I do.
The gold is a craving. If only I had it, I would be happy. Can't you hear that?
It's a dream, stop. All right. I can't think that dreams are bad.
You don't surrender your dreams, Dan. You surrender the one thing you never have and never will control. Except that you don't control what will happen to you. That you may or may not compete in the Olympics. That you may or you may not, Dan. And you're something exceptional either way.
I was ready to give this all up, but you stood here and you told me that you wanted me to train again.
I told you a warrior does what he loves.
And this is what I love.
Chasing gold, living in fear that you might fail. That's what you love about it?
No, dreaming of standing up there and winning this thing. I'm doing what has always felt like the thing I was put here to do. I've been on a trampoline since before I could ride a bike because I love it. Because it was the first thing I was sure that I loved. I'm sorry, okay, I'm sorry. I thought I was strong, but I'm not. Because I really try to give this whole thing up, but I can't.
Tomorrow morning, bring your hiking shoes. I've got a place I've wanted to take you since the first night you walked in here. It's a long hike, but I think you're finally ready to see it.
Okay, so let's philosophize this a bit. So after Dan's epic training montage, he approaches his coach in anticipation that he has regained his strength after his accident. His coach does not share the same sentiment, viewing his presence at the gym and informs him that he has denied his request to compete again. Socrates reminds Dan that suffering is fundamental to the human condition, and whether we get or not get what we desire, we suffer either way. We don't get what we want, we are disappointed with not achieving our desired outcome. We do get what we want, we suffer because it does not last. This principle is discussed in Buddhism's Four Noble Truths, that life is based on impermanence and hence the root of our suffering. Socrates tells Dan that it does not matter what his coach thought, and no one is necessary for him to do what he loves but himself. He tells Dan how the craving is the problem that prevents him from being happy. If I only had it, I would be happy. Can't you hear that? Dan is confused, responding that our dreams cannot be bad. Socrates replies that it is not your dreams that you surrender, but control over what happens to you. Regardless of what happens to you, you are an exceptional person. Burns would be in agreement that our value as a person is independent of what happens to us. The distinction between process and outcome orientation is very relevant. If we attach value to the outcome, we can suffer unnecessarily if we do not achieve the outcome. If we attach ourselves to the process, it is within our control and we will not create unnecessary suffering. What we are doing is what produces value, not the results. It is important not to allow the outcome to affect our self-esteem or the value we have for ourselves. The should distortion can come up in the context of telling ourselves we should achieve a specific outcome. Essentially, the warrior does what they love. When you do what you love, you are fighting for yourself. Only you can live for you. Living in fear of failure is a problem of the jumping to conclusions distortion, fortune telling, and catastrophizing. So, yeah, it's about if you are a thing, then doing that thing is being yourself, and you may get recognition of whatever that thing is, but that's a different, like indirect, you know. It shouldn't be the focus necessarily. And if you truly focus on yourself enough, you can become the best, and the people will recognize, hey, you're doing a great job, right? Which is like winning the gold. Okay, next dialogue. Who wants to read this one?
I go.
You guys? Okay.
Okay, so it's number 12. Then, life has just three rules:
And you already know that.
paradox, humors, change.
Paradox?
Life is a mystery. Don't waste time trying to figure it out.
Humor.
Keep a sense of humor, especially about yourself and its strength beyond.
Pain?
You know that nothing stays the same. Hey, can you tell me when it starts getting a little closer? Come on. Socrates, it's been 3 hours, man.
Yeah, we are here.
Where?
To what I came to show you.
The view?
There, next to your foot.
The flower?
No,
Better not be.
the rock.
There is something special about this one.
Something wrong?
Oh, come on, Socrates. This is what I was finally ready to see.
Well, the whole trip up there, you were excited. You were happy.
Well, yeah, but I was going to see something.
You were like a kid on Christmas morning. You said to yourself, the whole trip up there made you feel good.
Because for the last 3 hours, I've been waiting to see one thing.
Well, what thing?
There is nothing here but this rock.
I probably should have told you that before we left, but I guess I wasn't sure what we did find either. Never am. Sorry, you are not happy anymore.
The journey, it's what brings up the happiness, not the destination. That's great.
Very good. Socrates takes Dan on a hike to teach him his last lesson. On the way, he reveals the three main principles of his philosophy. The first is paradox. Life is a paradox. There's no point in trying to figure it out. This perspective is a way of giving up and you don't need to accept it. I disagree with this point. This is stated within Buddhist teaching, and the point is because our suffering does not come from understanding the metaphysical workings of the cosmos. Suffering is derived from desire and attachment, and therefore that is where one's well-being will be increased. Meaning in life can be achieved by establishing a significant purpose that is coherent with one's narrative and identity. Overcoming trauma has this within it, as an effective treatment. We have a responsibility to put things in place with our relationships in the context of coherence. Our social relationships can either give us great support or problems, making them a priority for our development. The second principle that Socrates tests down on is humor, which is a form of self-love. Do what makes you feel good as an activity, which is different from goals you may be planning productively. Learning to feel good is important in contrast to focusing on one's goals. If we do not feel good or become ill, we will never have the means ourselves to get to our goals. We can do this by building emotional energy throughout our activities and create positive emotional disposition. It's important to be mindful, not only to disqualify the positive, mindful to not disqualify the positive as a distortion. The third principle is that Socrates embarks on Dan is change. The concept of impermanence from Buddhism is clear here. Dan recognizes that nothing stays the same. Socrates then tells Dan that they have arrived at their destination and points to the rock beside Dan's foot. Dan is distraught, expecting something fabulous upon his arrival and disappointed to see what Socrates has to show him. Before he knows what the outcome was, he was excited, and after he knew it was unsatisfied. Socrates said, "Sorry you're not happy anymore." Dan recognizes that life is a journey, and the journey is what brings us happiness, not the destination. Ultimately, all of our destination is death. It is living that brings us happiness. Enjoying the moment by not being aware of the finitude of our existence and making sure we do not take life for granted. We take the time to appreciate things we value and be grateful for what exists. We can develop a sound principle within our experience to appreciate life, even though there will be moments of frustration or sadness. With sound principles, we can always guide ourselves back to the perspective of appreciation.
So our life is, I mean, like a journey. They emphasize the value of the journey. So let me think about this journey. So I'll give you an example. So like in the evening, I often feel very low energy, whatever. So but I also want to be productive. So at that time, I found myself, like I have to eat some ice cream to I don't know, maybe get the sugar or whatever.
Sure.
So it's almost like, but I'm also afraid it to become addictions.
Okay.
But without the ice cream, my whole evening will be like a very dismal, right? Whatever.
Okay.
So the journey is not very happy. So how can I find values? Like when I'm like physically I'm tired. I just couldn't do things I want to do. How can I still find value in that kind of a journey?
Well, okay, two things here. One is earlier when he says that there is no such thing as an ordinary moment. What he's really trying to say is that every moment, instead of looking at the negative or whatever, look at what is positive that you can appreciate throughout the day. So there's a practice there in being able to pick out different information. The second thing is a sense of realism, that when you're tired, it's just unrealistic to expect to be like running on a marathon or something like that, right? And so you got to kind of schedule your activities relative to like, how alert you are and how tired you are. Like,
But I have so much things I want to do, and so little time.
That's okay. Well, you got to prioritize it. That's part of just being human, right? And if you take care of yourself, the activities that you focus on, you'll extract a lot out of it. Whereas if you're super stressed out and you don't have time to do things, then the quality of your experience is depreciated because you're in like crisis mode. And that's why I teach this stuff, because Stephen Covey in Habit 3 talks about not being in crisis mode, quadrant 1. He's like, we want to shift over to quadrant 2, where it's important to do this thing, but it's not urgent. It doesn't have to be done immediately, but it is very important. Whereas if you have important things that are urgent, it's like you're always in crisis mode. And that's going to be hard, right? And so there may be some things that with your specific energy level, you can still do. Like maybe watching videos on the books you want to read. You might not be able to read then, but you could sit there and like listen to like a podcast or like a professor talk for a little bit. And
that I have to have ice cream.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the ice cream per se.
But I have the ice cream like almost every day.
Okay, so we can.
I feel like I could be killed by ice cream.
So
I could be diabetes.
We could talk about like alternatives to the ice cream, some other way that you can have a reward, right? That's like a dietary thing. So,
Okay.
Okay.
You did something that none of us can completely wrap our heads around. You know that, right? It's like a miracle or something, Dano. Whatever you learn, man, whatever that guy taught you, you think you could maybe rub a little of that magic on to me?
It's not magic, Tommy. It's getting rid of all that bullshit you had up in your head that tells you you may not be enough. You get up there, you make every move about the move. All right, not about the gold, not about what your dad thinks about it, not about anything but that one moment in time.
But this is for the gold. Everything we do, Dano, at least for me, my whole life is about 20 seconds in front of those judges. So that can give me that gold. You want to know what my dad would think of me if that happened? You know, you want to know how my whole life would change, how everything that's problem right now wouldn't matter anymore. I could have anything I want. I get to be happy. I get to be happy, Dano.
Okay, so Dan is now at the final qualifier for the Olympics. His friend Tommy is astonished at Dan's ability to recover from his accident and perform better than he did before it happened. Dan tells Tommy how the thoughts he is having are the reason why he's unable to perform to the best of his ability. It's important not to focus on the outcome, but the moment, and not be directed by the approval of others.
What time is it?
Now,
What are you?
this moment.
As Dan is upside down performing his triple flip, he hears Socrates speaking to him in his mind. Where are you? Here. What time is it? Now. What are you this moment? Dan has learned the wisdom of the peaceful warrior and how to be present in the moment. That is the peaceful warrior discussion. So you guys missed the other stuff, so you can watch the video to be posted on YouTube soon from last week, and then watch the movie, obviously. And next week, I believe we will continue with the 7 habits.
Political philosopher like Mills or John Rawls,
Mhm.
they also talk about what a society should be.
Okay.
What an ideal society. You talk about the freedom. The first principle that people should have the fundamental freedom. Even our constitution. They talk about we should have a free freedom of consciousness, free speech. So basically, they say without this freedom is so important to individuals. That's why we're putting them into the constitution, right? So, but here we talk about how a person is almost like a personal growth approach.
Yeah.
How a person can have the courage, can stand up. So the philosophers talk about how a society should be, and then they believe if we have this society, it would be best for the people to live a happy life.
Yeah.
To have their choices.
Mhm.
And here you talk about how people in a difficult situation can still have a chase. So I was wondering how this two relates. Like this is almost like, for individual to have a freedom, you need to have a good society. And this is how a society should look like. How a good government should be. Whatever. Here you talk about in difficult situation like Dan, in crosses, whatever. How you can still you can still you're not a victim. So I was wondering, if the society decides you, or you can still decide yourself without a society.
Well, like the Socrates in this book would say that you have to determine that on your own. And one of the earlier dialogues between them, he says, I want you to generate answers from within instead of always appealing to what other people say or having to do what other people tell you to do. Right. And so part of it is not like having a condemning view of ourselves or unfair expectations, and then just being empirical and then testing it out. Right. And that still works with the outcome, like not focusing on the outcome. Because if you just do your best and then you didn't get the goal, then you'd still be okay because you did your best. And so that's kind of the purpose. And I think there is something to be said about like not pissing off the wrong people and getting tortured and shit. Like that's obviously, there's a degree of being aware of danger and trying to avoid that danger. Like that's wise, obviously.
Recently there's a term called a political depression.
Okay.
But depression not from original family, but from living in a very unfriendly or inhuman society.
Sure.
Like dictatorship.
Yeah.
So I just thought about that, because that also related to what would be the more decisive factor? Is it the society or is it the individual's strength?
Well, I think oppression is the correct term. Depression is more like a person's like attitudes and perspectives of themselves. It's their self-esteem that is affected, and that can lead to thoughts of self-harm and things like suicide, right? And not being able to experience positive emotions, and like having a prolonged sense of being sad that's disproportionate to the situation or events, So yeah, like I think that external factors can make it challenging, but from the philosophy of CBT that we derive from David Burns' work, he would argue that it's your perspective of these things, the cognition, right? Like how you see it and what you say to yourself that leads to being depressed, not the environmental factors, which also ties back into Stephen Covey's proactivity stuff. It's my response that is being proactive, not being reactive. And so you could have like when you say political, it's like there's a whole group, the whole country is upset, And so that's like a social force, but you could still choose to be optimistic and say, even though it currently sucks, just because of my human nature or our human nature, we can find a way, right? Because you have control over your thoughts. You have this sense of autonomy, and we can cooperate, and we can understand each other's feelings. We can have empathy too, right? So let's do that together.
And also they talk about the process is in your control versus outcomes. You can choose. And again, stoicism is if you can't control, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
exactly. I can't control the weather. Don't worry, it's raining. Something is not up to me. They said that don't worry.
Yeah.
And they talk about miracles and about something. This is possible magic, but magic is not real.
Epictetus was one of the Stoics that talked about what's in our control and what's not in our control. And David Burns references Epictetus in the beginning of his book. So it's a good movie. That's where we're going with it. It's one of the first movies that I show with the group. And there's some other ones. So the next movie we're going to do is Waking Life. And then the movie after that is Gattaca. So we'll do Waking Life in a couple of weeks. Let's get through some more of the book. So the book we're going through right now is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So you can order it off Amazon, get the 30th anniversary edition. And then we're going to go through, we're going to finish. Yeah, we still have to finish Habit 3. So we have a little bit of reading for Habit 3, or did we finish Habit 3 last time? I have to check. So either we're finishing Habit 3 or we're going to, it's either we're going to finish that or we're going to move on to the next one. I'm going to do a quick review of the main things from the beginning of the book. So you guys will be here for the review. You can also watch the videos that are on YouTube. I made a playlist specifically for critical films, which is this, where we look through the films. And then there's the Philosophy Society, which is me just talking about stuff like at the beginning of the class. And then there's the 7 Habits course.